Hello and welcome to the new Circle HR Futures podcast. I'm delighted to welcome today, our guest is Jim Kennedy, who is the Senior Vice President of People Europe for Shionogi, which is a pharmaceutical company. We'll talk a bit about them in a moment. Today's podcast, along with the whole series, is brought to you in association with Kaplan Performance Academy, helping you meet your organizational development needs. So, Jim, welcome. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you with us this morning. My first question is always very similar, which is just tell us a bit about the organization that you're working in and your role.
Hi, Kevin. Really looking forward to the conversation today. Shionogi. Shionogi Europe is a 8-year-old, currently 225-person pharmaceutical company. And we are the wholly owned subsidiary of Shionogi and Company Limited, which is a mid-sized pharmaceutical company based out of Japan. So whereas we are a relatively young and small organization, our parent company is very, very much larger. And it also traces its history back over 140 years. So it's an interesting juxtaposition between tradition, culture, and outlook. So within Europe, we have currently businesses across the UK, Italy, Spain, now creating a new business in France. London is our operational headquarters. That's where most of our people are located, around about 125 currently. And then we have a small legal and fiscal headquarters in Amsterdam. That was our Brexit contingency, which we set up a couple of years ago. Our parent company, it's about 5,000 people in total. And we also have a sister company in the US, Shionogi Incorporated, which is about similar size to us. So okay. Shionogi in the US, it's a little bit older than we are. That we are, and our American colleagues are part of Shionogi's overall strategy as it takes its products to market globally.
Okay, Jim. So I'm interested in that. One of the things I wanted to pick up on is just sort of understanding what the product offering is for how you operate and how you compete, what your specialism is, and then secondly, what the roles are, what type of people you've got deployed across Europe. Is it just sales and marketing, or have you got other specialisms?
Sure. In terms of the scientific focus within Shionogi, it's actually quite broad, quite general. It's relatively agnostic. We do not, for example, particularly specialize in one therapeutic area. There are various therapeutic areas which we will pick up on, and that is sometimes determined or largely determined by what comes out of research and development. So looking at the legacy of our Japanese organization, it is in small molecule science, very, very high quality research and development from which certain compounds come forward, and then Shionogi takes to market either directly or it licenses through other organizations. So with respect to what we have in Europe, the business is effectively bifurcated. So on one side of the business, it's what we call the global development function. So this is regulatory, quality, clinical operations, which is all part of the ongoing practical research that takes place when drugs are being tested prior to being commercialized, or before they've got through the final regulatory hurdle. And clinical development, which is making the medical studies in drug testing. And then on the other side, it is commercial sales and marketing, but it's also things like medical affairs, about how we are helping to educate healthcare practitioners and key opinion leaders, and market access. So again, thinking through, particularly in Europe, which is inevitably quite a complicated model, because despite the European Union overlay, each country has its own sets of regulations and market authorizations and licensing and so on. So market access becomes a really important part.
Okay, and in terms of your role as being the SVP for people, I suppose what's the key areas of focus? What are the things that you're currently working on? What's your agenda for the organization?
What we are involved in is very, very rapid, quite aggressive growth, both organically and potentially inorganically. So what we are currently doing is taking new product to market. These products are highly specialized. It's for the hospital sector. We are building effectively a new business right now around these new drugs. And basically, as we are doing that, also looking for opportunities to enhance our product portfolio, whereby we can expand quite rapidly and also accelerate towards profitability. So as I said before, Kevin, we are a relatively young organization, fully funded by Japanese parent, but now the expectation is that we become profitable as quickly as possible. So it's about growing the organization, it's about maintaining business continuity, it's about making sure that we've got the right people doing the right things at the right time. We are a relatively lean organization, so it's again making sure that we've got the right talent profiles. Yeah. And I would also say that a very big part of what I'm responsible for is the cultural stewardship of the organization. That's a really important part. That Shionogi, we have people who come to us, stay with us because they like what we do, how we do it, what we stand for. So those kind of values and sense of purpose are tremendous bedrocks. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like a great job and a fascinating organisation going through that. I mean, I think growth's really an exciting place to be, particularly, where you're doing it both organically and trying to think about other relationships and products. It gives you the opportunity to scour presumably Europe and the world for talent, build great teams, create a culture which is, retains the heritage, but also is dynamic and galvanizes people and gives them their best. So I want to go back right to the beginning of your career now, though, Jim, because one of the things, there's a set sort of process that we go through in these podcasts. So I'm always interested in how people started. And some of that is just because, very few people, when they leave university, go, oh, I must go into HR. Many of us find our way accidentally. And some of those stories have always entertained me, how people end up in HR. So I'm really interested in your story. Was it a conscious choice or was it something you fell into? And again, you've been at it a bit like me for quite a number of years. So if you
the grey hairs go to show, yeah.
Absolutely. Even if you did fall into it accidentally, why have you stayed so long, I suppose?
I was one of those people, Kevin, who went through university not entirely clear what I would be doing after my university career. So as I approached the end of my time at university, I started, like a lot of other people, looking at career options and that kind of thing. And the more I looked across different sectors and different job disciplines and career paths, I kept landing on this thing, which it wasn't called HR at the time, Kevin. Yeah. That hadn't been invented yet. It was still called personnel management, and I kept landing on it, and I kept being drawn back to it. I was intrigued by it.
Okay, so what was it? Going back all those years, what was it that intrigued you? What did you keep reading?
Because I didn't know what it was. I did not know what it was. So it kind of triggered some kind of curiosity. Right, what is this? So I spoke to family and friends, and what is this thing called personnel management? And for every person I asked, Kevin, I got a different answer. Except that what I thought I took from it was that personnel, or as is now human resources, what it's about is the stewardship of the people and the organization. And then if you kind of peel that back a little bit more, a company or an organization is actually just a kind of, it's a construct. It doesn't exist. It's not a tactile thing that you can go and touch. The tactile piece is the people, how people come together, how they combine, how they work together to produce the product or the service or whatever. So in my very immature way as a 21-year-old, that's kind of what I surmise. But the other thing that I kind of figured out, and as it's proven to be, is that, okay, if personnel or HR means different things to different people, different organizations have different needs. So this kind of looks really interesting, because here's a career opportunity where there's the potential for a lot of variety, a lot of differences, a lot of potential interest, but also the opportunity to make of it what I can make of it.
Yeah, okay. And I've got a nice segue into the next question, because I think it picks up on what you've just said, Jim, which is one of the things when I look at your career is you've worked in, I suppose there's a theme of sort of manufacturing, there's a product thing in there, but other than that, you've worked in quite different sectors. So you've worked in defense, you've worked in chemicals, you've now worked in pharmaceuticals, medical devices, contact lenses. So one of my great questions, and again, the people that often listen to these podcasts are people that aspire to be HR directors. They're normally already in HR. And I think one of the things that I think is really quite interesting is that point you've made, in that HR plays different roles within different organizations and focuses on different things. So tell us a bit about your take. What's the same consistently and what are the differences? So I'm really interested in the sort of compare and contrast of HR in different sectors.
It's a really curious question, isn't it? Because, again, back to that point, Kevin, that different organizations have different needs at different times. What I have looked for is the interest for me in being in an organization that wants to do stuff and take things to a different place. That's generally what I've pretty much aspired to, and that's where I've aimed to concentrate my career. So, as you say, whether that's been in medical devices, now pharma, or whether it was in diversified industrials or whatever, it's been the opportunity to get involved in an organization that is really focused on performance and really working extraordinarily hard across all the pieces of the organization to take things to a new level. So that's given me a really fantastic opportunity to have worked in organizations which some have been very high margin businesses, some have been very low margin, some have been growth, some have been about transformation, reinventing themselves. But collectively, it really kind of boils down to this: okay, what are we going to be doing? What's that going to look like? And how are we going to make that successful?
Okay. So you look for those opportunities. You look for where there's a real strong performance culture. You look for an organization that's trying to do something, it's trying to grow or
certainly with organizations like Shionogi and previously my time at Cooper Vision, which are very, very purpose driven and very powerful set of common values or shared values within the organization. I think being part of something where there's a real sense of purpose
Yeah.
For me, it's been very motivating.
Well, it certainly helps out with our work, doesn't it? If there's an overriding sense of purpose which you can touch and feel, and it enables you to, align a culture, align performance to,
Correct.
to deliver something which is more than just, bottom line performance. It's
Correct.
something that makes a difference
Correct.
in people's lives. I want to take us off, as always. I do jump around a little bit, Jim, so I do apologize. But I want to sort of pick up a sort of a topical thing. As we're recording this, I don't know how many lockdowns we're in, but I think we're in lockdown 3. So obviously, I'm really interested in how organizations have coped with this, because it's been a really difficult period.
Yeah.
But so that's one bit, but the second bit's the important bit. The bit I'm really interested is what do you think the organization has learned? What have you learned? What's the organization learned? Potentially, what do you think you're going to do differently as a consequence of it? So I'm interested in to know, what you've done. I'm sure everyone's been working at home and doing everything that we've all been doing, but every organization's had different challenges and made different responses. So tell us a bit about how you've responded to COVID-19.
We're quite lucky as an organization because we've got quite a few medics, including vaccinologists, and we've also got people who are very, very familiar with viruses.
Yeah.
So actually that has been hugely beneficial, because what we did as COVID was kind of coming to the fore in early 2020 was that we organized an action team, a leadership action team around it, and thinking about what actually might happen with all of this. And the medics were able to tell us, well, sometimes this is how viruses work and they mutate, so we might have a lockdown and then things might recover a bit and then we might be back into this kind of scenario and all the rest of it. So what we were able to do is to start building that into our thinking. But at a practical level, what we also did was to move very, very quickly, because the vast majority of our people are office-based, and those people who are not office-based are in the field. So we don't have manufacturing, we don't have distribution, we don't have call centers, we don't have key workers. So what we were able to say to people right from the get-go is, look, if you don't want to commute, if you do not want to travel internationally, if you do not want to be in a situation where you feel underconfident about your environment, that's fine. We've got the technology, we've got WebEx, which is our alternative to Zoom, and so on. We'll work it that way. And of course, that was a tremendous fillip for our employees, because our staff said, okay, leadership is providing due care and consideration. So that really kind of just cemented that relationship of trust between us all. When we went into lockdown, Italy was actually 3 weeks ahead of us. And we learned a huge amount from what went on in Italy. So again, that kind of fed into the mix. And then going into lockdown, what we did was to say, this is now about mission control. So let's make sure that we know what we need to achieve as a business, make sure that those objectives are cascaded down through the organization. Let's make sure that everybody has line of sight, so that as we do work remotely, we've got a high degree of confidence that people know what they're doing and know that what they're doing is having the right kind of contribution. What we also did was to say presenteeism, the 9-to-5 mentality, no, that's gone. And then it was about encouraging managers who actually didn't need very much encouragement at all, was speak to your people, whether it's teams or individually, find out how people are getting on, where the pinch points might be. And what we also said, Kevin, to people is, look, if you are experiencing any difficulties, whether that's because you are in a small apartment or whether it's because you've got childcare responsibilities or whatever it might be, just let us know and give us the opportunity to respond to that. And that's how we've taken things on. And then layering in additional training. We also adopted a policy of over communication. So from leadership, we also wanted bottom-up communication. We put in place a whole kind of procedure, if you like, of skip sessions. Skip sessions are non-agenda driven conversations hosted by one of the higher ups. But somebody like you, Kevin, as a higher up, you got people on a call and you say, right, what do you want to talk about? How can I help? Yeah. So we put all of these things in place. We put in Yammer so that we had an alternative to the coffee station as best as possible. Yammer still doesn't quite do, the conversation, the impromptu conversation that you have when you go fix a cup of coffee in the office and catching up with colleagues from different parts of the business. So all of these things have been, I think, relatively successful. The feedback from our employees has been very good. By the way, one of the other things that we picked up pretty quickly is the potential impact on people's well-being. So we did some pulse surveys around that, try and figure out what was going on and how people were feeling and what to attend to. I mean, that in itself has been really, really interesting. Yeah. But honestly, look, I kind of feel that when you have something to respond to, work is relatively easy.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I'm really interested in, Jim. It sounds like you've done lots of really sensible, logical things, and
exactly.
Worked. Yeah, you've iterated it and modified it, and because it's been a bit of a longer period than we all hoped it would be. I suppose the question I'm really interested in is, what do you think the organisation's learned from it, and what will be different? I mean, I saw this week two things I suppose just sparked my sort of my antenna in the last couple of days. One is Unilever saying no one has to come back to the office. It's down to you. Individualization of how you work and when you work and out. Very, very open, very flexible. And I've seen the Irish government have made a statement today that they are going to create a right for people to work at home, which is, I always wary when governments start to intervene in this stuff, because they tend to, just legislate and regulate without thinking through how it works differently in different sectors and different businesses. But, also I can say things are going to be different, Jim. So I suppose, what's the learning and what do you think is going to be different for your business?
I think the key thing which it has really cemented is that relationship of trust. So when you have that situation where as a manager or as an employee that you are comfortable and confident in the relationship that you have with your colleagues, that despite the circumstances, you have the capability to get stuff done, you're going to get stuff done. Now, looking at it, we've had a phenomenally successful business year so far. And that's despite all of these circumstances. And an awful lot of it is just simply because of the amount of goodwill that's been generated between people, regardless of what their job is, regardless of their status. And I feel that is really going to be the catalyst for the future. So the point I would first of all make, Kevin, you want to jump in here?
I do want to jump. I know you got me going now.
So I think the first thing is, the first point is that what we've been doing over the last 9 months, not just us at Shinogi, but everybody else, is we've been responding. It's here and now. What do we need to do? As I say, there's a relative ease with that because we know what we're dealing with. The harder question is, where are we going? What's that going to look like? And that's the question you're asking. So for me, it's looking at a potential landscape which I think has become even more opaque than it was before. And what I think it also does is to say, you know what, an awful lot of the paradigms or the beliefs or the myths even of how we did work previously, I think an awful lot of that has just now gone out the window. Because exactly as you said, Kevin, people are not going to want to come back to offices 5 days a week. They're not going to want to do the 9 to 5. Private life and work life has blended much more. So I think that the future is also thinking about what the nature of work is and how that's organized and how that's set up. It's also what the role of the office is. And the office moves from somewhere that people sit at desks to do email to meeting spaces for creativity, for innovation, for problem solving, for decision making, precisely. And that, so I think that's going to be a big shift for us. But I also think what it does is inform us about what we really need from leaders. Yeah. And I think that as far as the leader piece is, we want leaders who are competent at what they do and are honest about what they do, and they're honest with their colleagues. Yeah. Because those are the two attributes that people, more than anything else, want from the people that they work for and work with. So that's now my job and my team's job is to figure out what else we can do to build that leadership capability around those principles.
I think you're spot on. I think you're in the right direction, Jim. I mean, I think the thing around trust is hugely important, and I think that's been driven by managers being, caring and listening and spending time with their people. And then following through on what they've said. If they said, if you've got childcare problems, if you can't do your work in your normal hours and you're going to fit it in another time, well, that's fine. Well, you then have to then live that and breathe it and deliver it and support that people. And I think that's what we've seen I think we've seen some authentic leadership where businesses have recognized that they've got to trust people. You've got to let people get on and work and find what works for them. We manage the output and the outcome, not all the inputs. And so I think there's a shift. It may have been quite stark for some managers. And I know lots of organizations where some leaders have actually taken to this and loved it, and it's been brilliant. And others which have found it more difficult because they're just used to working with their team in close proximity to them. So, I think we've got to find a way of supporting leaders and managers through this journey. But there is something really quite powerful.
I completely agree. And I think the biggest challenge is going to be if we are going to be experiencing further lockdowns, further restrictions, and about social distancing, and it probably is set for quite some time to come. But how are we going to compensate for the lack of social interaction, for those moments, for those times when having people in a room working on a problem together is key? How do we overcome the challenges of that? And I think there's another challenge that we've got to wrestle down as well, which is so taking our example, since March, April, we've recruited into the organization over 70 people. Much of that has been done entirely virtually, and it's been amazing. It's been fantastic. Even to the extent that feedback from these people is that this is the best onboarding I've ever experienced. But we've done a great job in hiring great people. But my concern is because they don't have that social interaction, because they're not in the office, they're now, we don't have those same opportunities for vicarious learning. People don't see what's going on in the office. They don't hear the casual conversations. They haven't got somebody that they can just turn around to and tap on the shoulder. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? So there are these inhibitions or constraints upon those people's development. how they integrate themselves into the organization, how they build their political networks within the organization, how they build their organization knowledge. And I think it also impacts people that we would regard as being, let's say, the high potentials, because it's the same situation. That how do we give them the same opportunities to develop on the job when we're in this virtual world? So I think these are the bigger problems now, and there are no particular answers. There could be any number of answers, and that's one of the great opportunities, because it's a real chance to be super creative and see what we can come up with. And I think probably, again, to answer your question, I think it's a preparedness, Kevin, to try stuff and see, and if it doesn't work, move on.
Yeah. Well, you know, I seem to spend a lot of my time talking about agile in HR, and people go, well, what is that? And I go, well, in reality, you co-create stuff. You get people in rooms, you ask them to work stuff up, they come up with a minimal viable view of what this might be, and you try it, and then you learn from it, and you keep going. It's an iterative, you know, and there's something in that for us, isn't there, about how we develop people solutions, you know. So you get a group of
there is. But also thinking about the future of work, that if the employment proposition is going to be fundamentally based on give me the flexibility that allows me to keep the best of that private life, work life blend, that gives me the opportunity to flex my hours, that gives me the opportunity to choose to a certain extent when I come to the office and when I work remotely. So one of the things that we're going to have to think, how do we accommodate that whilst at the same time helping other people overcome the mental constructs that we have to be in an office and we have to be doing this and it has to look like that? Because I think one of, you know, as I reflect on things, I think as much as we've done some really, really good things, in my opinion, one of the things that we still do is we insist that if we're having a video conference, we start at the top of the hour and we finish at the top of the hour. Now, if you're doing that meeting in the office, you're instantly into office time, aren't you? Because at the end of one meeting, what you do is you take a bio break and you go to the coffee station, you have a couple of minutes chat with whomever who's there, and you go back in. You've had a break. But in this virtual world, it's back-to-back video conferences, and it's a different way of working, and it is absolutely bloody knackering. Why do we do this? Why do we? We've simply transposed old working.
Yeah. We have.
Yeah. So that needs to be challenged.
Yeah, there's loads of opportunities and loads of challenges, and I think those, you know, that one about those two audiences, you know, high potentials and early in their career, and also potentially, you know, those people that have joined and have had a great onboarding experience but haven't got that organizational learning and haven't really understood the political frameworks and stuff. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to think about how we do that and do it differently. And you know, let's be honest, there will be a time when we do start, you know, coming back into work environments, I think differently, where we do collaborate. And, you know, the ideal scenario, I think, for human beings is a mixture, isn't it? It's always a balance and a blend. You know, what we find with people management all the time is actually you don't want a predominant view. You want something which is blended to the organization and to the individuals that work within it. But I'm going to move us on, Jim, because I thought that was a really interesting conversation, and I enjoyed it. And there's lots of stuff that you said which I think is going to resonate. Tell me about, let's go look into your career. Let's think about things that, you know, you're really proud of, things where you can look back and go, that made a difference. You know, we did that intervention, I led that, or we changed this, and actually it made a significant impact on performance or culture or how people worked or whatever it may be. But I'm always interested in looking at, you know, great stories, things that have gone well, so that other people can think and reflect and think about whether it would work for them.
I think that the thing which I feel particularly proud of amongst amongst quite a few things that I think actually that was a pretty decent job. So going back to my days at Coopervision, so that was the company I was working with before Shionogi. Coopervision had grown up quite rapidly through a lot of acquisitions, and the way in which the company had approached those acquisitions was to effectively buy product or technology or both, and then kind of create a quite a tight federation of organizations, but didn't really do anything around any cultural re-engineering. And it made a very significant acquisition in 2005, and even by 2009, 2010, we were still experiencing some of the impact of effectively feeling like we were two organizations internally from a cultural perspective. And we're a global organization, we're rapidly growing, and it becomes more and more evident that actually we are not helping ourselves. So at a leadership level, what we decided to do was to take a very comprehensive review of what we understood ourselves to be, but also understand what our customers perceived, and then work out where we were going to go from there. But basically what that told us was that actually we were all over the map. that we stood for different things, and that our customers had different perspectives. And actually quite a number of our customers said, the proposition we have from you is we're confused. You're a bunch of good guys and we love working with you, but it's totally confusing. And the other epiphany was that the way in which we went to market was that we were effectively doing what the 800-pound gorillas were doing in that marketplace. So we were not really genuinely differentiating ourselves. So then it was a case of, right, we're going to rebrand. And with the rebranding, we are going to re-engineer our culture. So it was an inside out, outside in activity. And then from an HR perspective, it was working very, very closely with colleagues right across the business to say, right, what is the red thread that brings us all together, that we all share in common? It was about identifying our core common values, and the way in which we did that was through a lot of extensive research with our own people, and also testing that in the marketplace with some of our key customers. So the values that we came back with to the organization with were those kind of things which people could easily resonate with because they themselves had contributed to their identifying and articulating them. And then again, from an HR point of view, it was making sure that all of our programs, all of our activities, that the words matched up with the activities. And we reiterated it, and communications programs and the whole 9 yards, and testing it and testing it and testing it and testing it. The effect that all of this had was just an incredible explosion of energy, enthusiasm for this effectively new co. And that trickled very quickly into our business performance. Our growth accelerated by 1.5 times. So revenue growth, profitability growth, share price growth. And as that momentum took place, the business performance accelerated and accelerated and accelerated.
So the question, it's a fantastic story. And again, I think there are many organizations that go through these types of things. And my instinct is half work and half don't. You know, yours clearly did deliver. Were there any things that you had to do that you went through where there were some, you know, some real symbolic things that you needed to change, that you thought there will be a group of people that want to hang on to this, but we need to, in light of what we're trying to create and what we've articulated, we're going to have to put some things on the altar, because I'm a great believer in, you take people with you, but when you're changing something, it doesn't all go, smoothly according to the plan or the sets of values. There are times when you have to go, we're going to just have to crack something here, because sometimes cracking the egg is what creates and releases the energy and the human thing, because they want to see that you've done it for real.
Yeah, I think one of the eggs that we had to crack was the initial skepticism. I would not say it's a negative skepticism, but just a healthy skepticism from a number of senior leaders across the organization. So this is the level down from the senior leadership team, that they needed to be convinced about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what was going to be different, because critically they've got a role in this. It has to be moved through them to the next level, and so on and so on. And the way we cracked that was the first time in the company's history was to gather all of those leaders in one room, which we did in the basement of a hotel in San Francisco. And we had over 100 people in that room, and we spent 3 days together going through, really concentrating, why are we doing this? The what's the easy bit, right? But explaining the why, giving the rationale, and giving people a sense of what the outcome was going to be. And part of the way in which we unlocked that was to make sure that we were mixing people up. So whether you were from Puerto Rico manufacturing or whether you were from Germany commercial, we got those guys talking with each other. They would never normally have that opportunity to do it. Mm-hmm. But what we wanted to do was to really make sure that we got a mix, that we introduced people from across the organization, cross-functionally. And what that did was really to demonstrate that actually for all of the differences that people have, either because of their national background, cultural background, their job discipline, level of tenure within the organization or whatever, it was actually the things that we have in common are far, far, far greater. And I think that was a huge epiphany for a lot of people, that the commonality that we shared is a damn sight more powerful. So why the hell are we spending all this time talking about country differences, regional differences? It doesn't work like this in manufacturing, it doesn't work like that in distribution. All those kind of typical daily arguments and conversations that we in HR have about why things cannot happen. So once we kind of dispersed all of that mythology, it was plain sailing.
Sounds fantastic. Sounds a great, it sounds like something you should be proud of and something that you should talk about, because again, those experiences are hugely important, and in the history and lifetime of organizations, sometimes they're the tipping point, one of those inflection points which make a huge difference and release the energy and deliver the growth and the superior performance. We're going to take a break now. We'll be back in for the second part of our podcast with Jim Kennedy. We will be back in 30 seconds. Please stick with us, and we'll talk a bit more about the HR profession. We'll talk a bit more about Jim the man, and I'm sure it'll be as informative as the first part.
As the world comes to terms with the COVID-19 crisis, Sercal want to help HR leaders look to the future. Will the crisis shift the world of work for good? What will this look like, and how should HR leaders help prepare their business? These are the questions that Kevin Green and the resident Sercal experts will consider as part of the Shifting World of Work content series. Visit sercal.co.uk to find out how you can get free access to Sercal's up-to-the-minute news, research and opinion for you and your team today.
Welcome back to the second part of the HR Futures podcast, brought to you by Sercal in association with Kaplan Performance Academy. With me today is Jim Kennedy, who is the SVP, Senior Vice President for People Europe for Shinogi. We had a great conversation in the first half of the podcast. I recommend that you listen to it. We talked about change management. We talked about a whole host of things in relation to COVID-19 and what his business has learned and what they're going to do differently. Jim, what I'd like to do now is, we talked a bit about what you've done well and what you're proud of. When we look back at our careers, there's always things we think, well, I learned a lot from that. That didn't go quite according to plan. Is there one or two things that you can think of which are, really good learning experiences, which often means I'm not going to do it that way again?
Gosh, what a question. Do you know what? I don't think I've particularly reflected on those things. It's kind of what I learned to do in my early career was to get over the self-flagellation. It's that my philosophy is, if you've made a mistake, you are where you are. Right. What are you going to do next? And I think the key learning for me, I suppose, in my career is that if something has not gone quite right, or has gone horrendously wrong, it's what's going to single you out and how you're going to be perceived by others is what you do next. It's not necessarily what's happened. What's going to make the difference is what you do to react to that.
Yeah. I suppose it's also about a secondary thing, which is just not making the same mistake again. So it's logging it and saying, well, if I ever happen to be in a similar situation, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. Yeah. Okay. So tell me, one of the things that I know we get when we get feedback from people is, one of the questions that I tend to ask a lot is about, the thing about HR, there's millions of different things we can do. We can change reward mechanisms, we can spend time working on performance or succession plans and talent attraction, and it goes on and on and on. One of the things I'm really interested in is, how do you decide what to focus on in your people strategy or plan, and what you're going to leave? What are you not going to do? Because I think I see HR functions that are just overloaded. They're trying to do too much, trying to change too many things at once. And I think it's always about choice and prioritization. So I'm interested in how you go about that.
It is tied to the business. So it's an awful lot of conversations with peers and with the boss, and bringing my colleagues, my HR colleagues, into those conversations as much as possible as well, and encouraging them to have conversations with their customers within the business. And you're exactly right. There is a trade-off. There's only so much time, and it's really getting focused in on the things that we believe are going to make the right kind of difference at the time. So for sure, I think one of the consequences of that is that there is a trade-off, because you're right, Kevin, you can only do certain things, and you can't do the whole thing. Don't boil the ocean, or try to boil the ocean. But what we've also got to remember is, look, if we decide we're going to change the comp program, that's going to have consequences in other areas. Mm-hmm. And it's understanding how things connect with other parts, so that, okay, I'm not spinning the talent management plate right now, but I'm changing my comp program. I know that this is going to have an impact. Yeah. And I've got the experience now to have a sense of what I think those possible outcomes might be, in which case we start taking one or two contingencies and we start having those conversations. So there's a little bit of heading off at the past, but also giving people that comfort that, yeah, this is where it could go. And if that's what happens, this is what we'll do about it.
Okay.
So let's try and keep it all joined up.
But I like the thing about aligning it to the business. I like the thing about engaging leaders in the conversation, making the trade-offs, thinking about the consequences and how this stuff fits together, I think is important. I'm going to sort of move us on to talk about, rather than your career and your organizations, a bit about the profession, I suppose. And there's two sort of questions. Let's do the first one. The first one, I suppose, is, what do you think? I think we've made great progress. We've known each other for years, and I think the HR community profession has moved on. I think we've matured. I think we've learned a lot. I think we're adding more value. but I still think there's a way to go. And I'm interested in your view about, you know, what do we need to improve to up our game, to get to the next level, to add more value, you know, across the piece rather than specific within your company?
Again, it's a huge question. Huge question. I think HR has made a lot of progress. That's definitely true. And I also think that actually HR has made a lot of, I think it's kind of moved away from what it could be doing and how it could be doing and how it could be contributing. And I don't think that has been positive at all. But where the opportunity for HR, I think, continues to be is, what is it that as an organization we're trying to do? Where are we trying to get to? How can I help that conversation? How can I make sure that I understand what the organization's requirements are? How do I make sure that I am able to fully understand, without having done another person's job, what my CEO is driving at and what's motivating him in one direction as opposed to another direction? So it's building out that sense of the whole organization rather than HR for HR's sake. And I think we've got those expectations on us from our colleagues across the business. I know I certainly have it from my chief operating officer, also my chief executive. We can get so consumed by what we understand to be our discipline, HR, that sometimes we can lose sight of what's going on around us. And we can think we're doing a good job. And then you get a tap on the shoulder saying, what are you doing? Where's this taking us? How does this add value? How does this take the organization forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to those, you know, before we do stuff, it's asking ourselves those questions in our head, you know, why are we doing it? What difference did it make, and how would we measure it? And if you've gone through that and asked yourself that from a business perspective, I think, you know, you're likely not to go off and just do HR things for the sake of HR. You will be.
I think that's the point. Any prescription we give is not because we've lifted it from some book or we've learned about it because that's what the organization down the road has done. It's exactly that. It's understanding how this is going to help us and move our organization forward.
Okay. Along the same lines, I'm interested in HR. So, young person, I don't know, perhaps a graduate, perhaps, you know, second job, thinking about a career in HR, comes to you and says, you know, look, I might be thinking about sales, marketing, other business disciplines, but I have got an interest, a curiosity perhaps around HR, and they come to you to get your view. You know, what's your take? You know, what advice would you give them about whether to embark on an HR career or to work in a different part of organizations?
What do you want from your career? What is it that interests you about HR? And I think the other thing is that, in addition to what we've already talked about different organizations having different needs, different approaches being applied at different times, is that HR is really a very broad church. You've got really quite a number of specialisms within there. And then you've got the generalists who just about know enough about those specialisms to be dangerous. And that's part of our job, right? What do you want from your career? What kind of organization do you want to work for? And then think about, okay, this is my kind of personality type. These are kind of my career aspirations. Which aspect of HR is going to fulfill those or likely to fulfill those? And I think the other thing is to be prepared to give it a go. And if it doesn't quite work out for you, go try something else. I think one of the great things about HR is transferability. So if this organization is not right for you, there will be another one. So I think that willingness to experiment is really key. And I think the other piece of advice that I would give people is that there's a lovely phrase, Kevin, isn't there, that it's about how you dance in the rain. Again, so there's two aspects to that for me. The first is go make things happen, go do stuff, go try it. You'll never find out otherwise. But it's also significant about resilience, because HR is an incredibly complex field. And the reason that it's complex is because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And there is nothing more complicated
than human beings. Absolutely. That's what makes it. That's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? Really, I think if you
that's what, exactly, and that's what can make it so incredibly fulfilling as well.
Yeah, but I like that. How you dance in the rain, I think is good. I think there's something in that. It's about how you deal with adversity, and the jobs that we do of trying to influence, encourage, challenge, get organizations to behave differently and individuals to do different things is incredibly difficult and at times and complex, and but incredibly rewarding, perhaps more rewarding than others.
I think so, and I think as you were talking about that and going back to the people complexity, one of the ways in which I think people starting out in the profession can quickly make their mark is make it simple for your internal customers. So forget all the jargon. Can you take the HR language and vocabulary and translate that into plain English? Because if you can, I promise you, you're going to make friends very, very quickly, and people are going to seek you out very, very quickly because they'll want to work with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think HR people have got to be business people first. You've got to be able to understand the wants, desires, requirements of your customers, what they want to happen, the type of people they want around and the team they want to build. And you've got to, establish credibility by, making things happen, by doing some of the things that are going to move them on that journey. And if you do that, you build a relationship and you add some value and they keep coming back, don't they, Jim?
That's it. That's it.
Okay, so I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to finish off this podcast, Jim, by talking a little bit about you, the person. So one of the things that I think is important and customary in these podcasts is we talk about people's careers, we talk about their views on our profession, we talk about all sorts of things in relation to their business life. But what I'm always interested in is just getting a little bit of a handle and a little insight into what people do outside of work, what their passions are. So, for you, Jim, what are your passions outside of work? Is it music, sport, literature, family, travel? I mean, the point is the world that we live in.
There's an eclectic list, and I suppose there's parts of all of those things. But yeah, I mean, having a life outside of work is incredibly important. So I suppose that's another piece of advice that we could give, particularly to people coming into the HR profession or indeed into the world of work, is make sure that as best as possible you give yourself a life outside. So for me, the life outside is I really enjoy my wine. I have a nice little collection, which doesn't seem to stick around. Kind of bottles tend to get opened, but I play golf, or I try to play golf, and I really enjoy that because it just takes me completely away from everything else, and that's just a few hours on a Saturday or a Sunday when we're not in lockdown, where I can just concentrate on doing that. But yeah, going back to the point, Kevin, is that I think somebody told me years ago that have 3 legs in your life, and you have a really good platform. So you have your work, you have your family and friends, and then you have your pastimes.
Yeah, most probably not bad advice, is it?
I think it's pretty good. It's a stable platform. Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me about your wines. Are there a particular region, or is it red and white that you like, or?
Well, one of the things that I was very fortunate to do when I was with Cooper Vision, I was living in California for a period. So I took the opportunity to go and explore the California wine country. Mm-hmm. And I picked up various bottles and that kind of stuff whilst I was out there. So there are 1 or 2 wineries that I particularly like, and I have a preference for red wine over white wine. I have a membership of a wine society, which is just been fantastic because it just encourages me to go and experiment, go and try different things. Mm. So, but I really quite enjoy that.
So give us a recommendation then. Give us a Californian red that you think that people should try.
If you can get it, Ridge.
Okay.
Ridge. So a Ridge Zinfandel or a Ridge Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay. And why is it so good?
Try it and you'll find out.
Okay. Well, on that note, thanks for spending the time with us, Jim. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed your take, particularly stuff about COVID. I thought was great. The stuff about the change program at Cooper Vision was excellent. I think there's lots of nuggets for people. Thank you for spending the time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kevin.